Hi, everyone. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. We'll get started in just a minute. Hi, I'm so excited to share with you today the following webinar, Cancer and COVID, Legal Resources for 1 year since the pandemic. This presentation is supported by a grant from the Tower Cancer Research Foundation. Although I'm a lawyer, today's presentation is not legal advice. This presentation also does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Today's webinar is part one of a four-part series supported by a generous grant of the Tower Cancer Research Foundation. The series is called Cancer During COVID because the pandemic has made things more difficult for everyone and can be especially challenging for someone affected by cancer. This is the Cancer Legal Resource Center, and we are a program of the Disability Rights Legal Center based in Los Angeles, California. We help people nationwide. We are an educational model and will do intakes in English and Spanish, and also have a language line for speakers of other languages. All of our services are confidential. I'm going to do my best to leave time for questions at the end of the webinar. Hopefully, I will be able to answer your questions. But if I'm not sure, or if you have questions that come up down the road, this is the best way to get in touch with us, either filling out an intake on our website or calling our toll-free number to leave a message for someone to call you back to complete an intake. All of the information we provide is free, though we do not provide legal advice or direct representation. The CLRC also maintains a library of fact sheets on a variety of cancer-related legal issues on our website, including a resource called our Patient Legal Handbook. The handbook provides a brief overview of many of the most common issues and questions that people living with cancer and their families have. And we'd like to give a special thanks to the handbook's generous sponsors, the American Cancer Society and Breakaway from Cancer. If you're interested in receiving a large number of copies of our handbook, please submit a bulk order on our website. We also have PDFs of the handbook in English and Spanish available to download for free. Our webinars are always free and cover a wide variety of topics. On your screen is the YouTube link to watch our past webinars. The CLRC also has a professional panel, which includes attorneys from across the country who help those with cancer if a caller needs help. And this matter could be in their state and practice area. The following are just some of the practice areas that attorneys may handle: landlord-tenant, health insurance matters, medical malpractice, estate planning, employment law, and divorce law. It's a minimal commitment. All the attorney agrees to is a half-hour consultation. It's very easy to apply. And the CLRC is hosting a free and virtual 40-minute event on April 6th, 2021 at 12 p.m. Pacific. Please go to our website to apply for the professional panel and or register for the event. Let's move into the presentation. We're going to cover financial and other resources in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic, but let's get the basics covered. Obviously, cancer is an extremely expensive illness, even for those who have good health insurance coverage. So, what is cancer-related financial toxicity? It's essentially financial distress or problems that affect people with cancer due to the cost of treatment. Because cancer treatment affects a patient's ability to work and pay bills, financial toxicity is often caused by loss of income. And even the best insurance doesn't cover 100% of the costs. So having a good job with good insurance doesn't always prevent financial toxicity or financial burdens. This is especially true when you take into account transportation, parking, and potentially housing and other hidden or indirect costs. And it can be difficult to get coverage for those costs, even with the best insurance plans. There are a number of ways to help minimize cancer-related financial toxicity, including consumer protections, debt management, optimizing and maintaining health insurance, and of course, income replacement. Cancer is one of the most expensive medical conditions. Insurance, copays, and co-insurance are just one piece of the financial toxicity puzzle. Most everyone will have some or a lot of out-of-pocket costs. Prescription drugs for cancer are often more expensive than those for other conditions. People have to take time off of work for treatment and recovery, and family members may have to take time off as well. For a person who has a recurrence of cancer or has multiple cancers, the medical costs and loss of income are even greater. Health insurance is important. The first step in preventing or minimizing financial toxicity and to address practical financial concerns is to have and understand how to use health insurance. I'll talk a bit about health insurance options today and options for healthcare if you can't get insurance. And I'll briefly go over some information about insurance appeals. Again, this is going to be a quick overview. Despite the fact that we look to our doctors and other healthcare providers to know everything they need to know about our health and make informed decisions about our care, they're not necessarily the ones responsible for making sure that the care they recommend is covered by your insurance plan. It's the patient's responsibility to understand their own insurance coverage. Having an understanding of what is covered and what cost sharing is required can help a patient plan ahead for their finances and avoid unforeseen costs. So, find out information about your policy. Your summary plan description of or evidence of coverage description usually can be found online on your plan's website. Contact your human resources department, get a copy of your plan, and get familiar with your policy. You should become familiar with your copay, deductible, and co-insurance responsibilities, and also be aware of any services that might require prior authorization. Additionally, it is important for you to understand your insurance network and whether there is reimbursement for out-of-network services. Always contact a provider directly to confirm whether the provider accepts your insurance. Even if a provider is covered by insurance, it may be difficult to predict exactly what your out-of-pocket costs will be given your deductible, copay, and co-insurance responsibilities. Of course, having insurance in the first place is one huge step towards addressing practical financial concerns. One or the more the following options may be available to you. I won't go into a lot of detail about these different options, but suffice it to say, you should be aware of your insurance options. We have additional resources available on our website. Employer sponsored or COBRA may be an option if you're leaving your job or have lost your job. In just a little bit, I'm going to go over some of the more recent protections due to the pandemic, but I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with the information that was out there before the pandemic. And if these protections go away, what information will be out there after. So COBRA as an option can be expensive, but it can help maintain coverage after employment. An alternative and potentially less expensive option would be to purchase a new plan through the state marketplace. Some states have their own private marketplace, while others use healthcare.gov. It may be tempting to buy the cheapest plan, the one with the lowest monthly cost, but some of those plans with lower premiums may end up costing you more in the long run. That's if they have higher deductibles or out of pocket costs that are higher. When you enter in your income on the website, you'll learn whether there are tax credits to help lower the cost of your insurance premiums each month. The same is true for short term health plans. They may be cheaper, but they likely don't provide the coverage that someone would need if they get diagnosed with cancer. Medicaid is a health coverage program run by the states. Eligibility is traditionally based on low income, low assets, and disability. With Medicaid expansion, many states have expanded eligibility by having only an income-based requirement. Medicare is available to people who are turning 65 or those who have been eligible for SSDI, which stands for Social Security Disability Insurance, for 24 months. The most important thing I'll mention about Medicare is that we hear far too frequently from people who opt not to sign up for Medicare when they first become eligible due to already having other coverage or believing the card was sent to them in error. If you're nearing Medicare eligibility, either age or SSDI, please make sure you fully comprehend potential downfalls of not signing up during the initial enrollment period. Premiums can be significantly elevated if you do not sign up during that initial enrollment period. So let's get to some of the more recent legislation. So the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law by President Biden this month. So you have some of the latest updates. If your employer laid you off or reduced your hours, the federal government subsidizes 100% of COBRA premiums until September 30th, 2021. This does not count as income for tax purposes. There's also more information about the American Rescue Plan Act and COBRA. if you're not enrolled in COBRA, or if you were enrolled but discontinued coverage, you can still enroll in subsidized COBRA. The enrollment period starts April 1st, 2021 until 60 days after the health plan notifies you about the extended enrollment. COBRA subsidies are not available to those eligible to enroll in another group health plan, qualified smaller employer health reimbursement arrangement, or flexible spending arrangement, and those eligible for Medicare. Now, all of this is of the date of this recording when we talk about deadlines. So we'll see what happens after the deadlines that we currently have. So looking at the American Rescue Plan Act, there's also an effect on the health insurance marketplace. So there are 2020 premium tax credit clawbacks. So if you bought marketplace health insurance, and as you know, we just discussed COBRA, now we also discussed marketplace health insurance. Like many people, you might have opted to receive premium tax credits in advance because after all, that would reduce your premium cost each month. So since premium tax credits are based on income level, if someone predicted they'd earn less and ended up earning more, they would normally have to pay back those extra premium tax credits. But for 2020, which is the past year, this payback is waived. So there's also another aspect when it comes to this. So those who receive unemployment benefits in 2021 will have their income treated as no higher than 133% of the federal poverty line for the purpose of health insurance marketplace subsidies, except if a household member is eligible for affordable employer-based coverage, then the household is barred from the premium tax credits for the health insurance marketplace. So another aspect which was kind of interesting to the American Rescue Act is that before the law, if you earned more than 400% of the federal poverty limit, you couldn't get a tax credit for the health insurance marketplace. But for 2021 and 2022, there's no earning limit. And in fact, you won't pay more than 8.5% of your income for a premium for a health insurance plan on the marketplace. So there are definitely some new, while the framework of COBRA and the health insurance marketplace that we covered initially is definitely there, and that's an important calculus, there are additional protections that are especially important for those trying to pay for healthcare. Now let's get back to the basics. If you can't get healthcare otherwise, here are some options. Although this can be an expensive option to get private health insurance, anyone can purchase private health coverage as long as they do so directly from an insurance company or through an insurance broker. Some people are not eligible to purchase through the marketplace due to immigration status or Medicare, Medicaid eligibility. Hill-Burton, you can see that on your screen. It's a law that gave hospitals and other health facilities money for construction and modernization. In return, the facilities that received these funds agreed to provide a reasonable volume of service to people unable to pay. While the program stopped providing funds in the late 1990s, certain healthcare facilities are still obligated to provide free or reduced cost care. You can call the national hotline to get a list of obligated facilities. And finally, charity care. Many hospitals have free or low-cost care available to low-income patients. Speak with a social worker, financial navigator, or the patient services at your local hospital department to determine which options may be available. You often have to provide information about your income and other assets. So if you are insured but are concerned about outstanding medical bills or the best ways to use your insurance coverage, these tips can be helpful. Here are a couple things to keep in mind to make sure you get the most out of your insurance policy. Check it with your insurance company to see if they offer a case manager. If your plan or hospital does not offer a case manager or patient navigators, ask to speak with the same person each time you call if possible. Now, of course, that only applies if you had a good experience with that person that you called. But if you did, then I would suggest asking to speak with that same person again. positive report can go a long way, as the insurance employees may be willing to spend time finding ways to reduce costs. It's the hospital's case manager that makes sure that a patient's health insurance company understands what's happening during the patient's hospitalization. They make sure the insurer has all the information it needs to approve payment for the hospitalization and works to prevent insurance claim denials. They communicate with the health insurer's case manager every day or every few days. Additionally, a hospital case manager might negotiate coverage benefits between a health insurer, provider, and the patient. The health insurance company's case manager receives information from hospital case managers, home healthcare companies, physician offices, social workers, and other healthcare providers. It can be awkward to have conversations about costs with your providers. I totally get it. But at the end of the day, if you can't afford the treatments and prescriptions your provider is recommending, or if you're not adhering to the schedule or dosing based on cost, your provider needs to know. They can't help or recommend less expensive options if they don't know your situation. Keep dates, times, and extension numbers in addition to writing down names. If you're required to get a pre-authorization, request it sent by mail or email and keep it. If you fail to get required prior authorization for a certain service, it can be difficult to get the service approved later. Open all mail, even if it seems daunting. Review all bills. Compare them with your EOB, which stands for Explanation of Benefits. Insurance EOBs explain what you owe the provider. Mistakes happen. Prescription drug copays are especially expensive these days, especially for new therapies that have no generic equivalent. Someone with cancer may not take their medicine as directed so that they can save money on copayments. People often encounter issues with medications not being covered. I'll just quickly introduce some common issues with coverage of medication. Some reasons medication might be really expensive or not covered. It can be difficult to get off-label drugs covered by insurance. So most insurance policies have what's called a prescription drug formulary. That's a complicated word to essentially be a list of medications your insurance company will cover at different percentages, usually tiered low to high. For example, a generic drug may be in a lower tier, meaning it comes out at a cheaper cost to you, while certain brand name medications are at a higher tier, meaning the insurance pays less and it costs more out of pocket for you. You can ask your insurance company, or if you have Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage, for a copy of your insurance formulary. Patients or providers can petition for an exemption, which is a sort of informal insurance appeal. If you have issues getting a certain medication paid for, you may be able to use discount pharmacies or coupons to cover certain medications. Or if the issue is your insurance, they may be able to help you figure out what to do next. Sometimes the cash price for a generic medication can be even cheaper than a copay through insurance. So it can be worth asking what the cash price is for some medications. Sometimes it also makes sense to do a mail order, which may or may not save money on copays, but could save time or money spent to get to and from the pharmacy. Your insurance might have you do step therapy. That means you may have to try less expensive medications first and demonstrate those don't work before your insurance will pay for a medication your doctor originally requested. Or if you need a medication covered for which your insurance denies coverage, your doctor can help you appeal with the insurance company to try to get it covered as medically necessary. The CLRC website has insurance appeals information as well as a fact sheet on accessing prescription medication. Another way to minimize financial toxicity is to make sure that your health insurance plan is covering the costs that they're supposed to, those that are medically necessary and covered under your plan. Private insurance companies have different procedures for appeals. and it varies by state. The process for completing the appeal should be found in the denial letter sent by the insurance company. That means the instructions should be in the letter that you get and should also contain information about strict timelines that must be followed for a successful appeal. That means even if you get the denial of insurance coverage and you might be tempted to just toss that paper, make sure to look through it because that same paper will have the instructions on how to appeal. When you go through the appeal process with the insurance company, this is called the internal appeal. If you are unsuccessful with an insurance company's internal appeal process and they still deny coverage, it doesn't have to end there. You can request an external review through the state with a third party, and that decision is usually binding. This is called an independent medical review or external appeal because someone else gets a say in the appeal. Typically, you have to go through the insurance company first, unless the issue is urgent. Often, medical teams are unaware of insurance difficulties that patients face. Your medical team may be able to either help you appeal or help you go another route so you don't suffer with so much out-of-pocket expense. This is just another reason to get familiar with your insurance policy. If you don't know what's supposed to be covered, how will you know to raise an issue if your insurance doesn't pay what it's supposed to? Now, if you have Medicaid or Medicare, the procedures are different, and I won't go into detail about that here, but you can contact your state Medicaid agency for appeal information. If you have Medicare, your local SHIP office is a good resource. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, many of the practical financial concerns of people with cancer are related to or as a result of a combination of high medical expenses and loss of income. Some would argue that the loss of income is the most important practical financial concern. So I want to quickly touch upon job and income protection. Having adequate health coverage or focusing on reducing healthcare costs simply isn't enough to address these concerns. This is the shortest section of this presentation, but worthy of its own entire presentation. We have a lot more resources on these topics on our website and YouTube page. Cancer-related financial toxicity often springs from people losing their income due to needing to take time off of work, either for themselves or a loved one dealing with cancer. There are medical appointments to get to, physical recovery from cancer treatment, whether it be surgery, physical therapy, chemo, or other medical treatment, fatigue from having gone through medical treatment, or unfortunately, people sometimes lose their jobs due to discrimination or exhaust their medical leave. So it's important to understand there are laws that protect people in the workplace. And even if your job is protected, that doesn't mean your time off will be paid. Insurance and income are important, so I want to talk about some laws that provide protection in the workplace. I'll discuss income replacement on the next slide. It's important to know job protection and income replacement are not the same. When someone says they're out on disability, it's not clear whether that means they're on disability leave, receiving disability benefits, or both. A lot of people with cancer don't realize that they are potentially protected by disability anti-discrimination laws. In a lot of cases, maintaining employment is the most important thing to prevent financial toxicity. And I'm also going to go into in just a little bit about some COVID-19 pandemic related protections that do apply to taking time off. However, I want to make sure that we get the basics covered. FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, is the law that provides people with some job and benefit protected medical leave for themselves or a family member. If you work for a public agency or private employer of 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius, you could be eligible to take up to 12 weeks of job protected medical leave and get your same job and benefits when you go back to work. Some states have a similar law, and some employers provide medical leave similar to FMLA. Again, this is just a 30-second overview of a very complex law. You may want to work with your doctor as well on medical certifications. The American with Disabilities Act, or ADA, you can see the ADA on your screen, is the federal law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination at a public employer or a private employer with 15 or more employees. Cancer can be considered a disability under the ADA definition, so you may be eligible for a reasonable accommodation in the workplace, including physical adjustments to the workplace or adjustment in company policies. The CLRC has publications on its website dealing with protections in the workplace and how to speak to an employer about a cancer diagnosis. It's important to understand your rights early on. The CLRC website has a repository of information on employment law, including webinars and handouts. Again, maintaining employment when at all possible is imperative in avoiding financial concerns, so it might be helpful to ask your doctor to suggest accommodations you may be able to use at work. After all, they're probably fairly familiar with the side effects of your medications or surgery. Some states have expanded protections and apply to employers with fewer employees, or specifically include cancer in the definition of disability. Again, this was just a super quick intro, so you know there are job protections. Now I'll give you some basic information on income replacement. Here are some options for income replacement if you're either out of work on unpaid leave or unemployed, unable to work. We often hear from patients and survivors who were unaware of their potential eligibility for these programs. So anything you can do to get informed about these programs may be helpful. The Social Security Administration offers 2 long-term disability programs in addition to providing retirement benefits. Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, is based on work credits. In other words, you pay into this system, so you're essentially insured. You can log on to the Social Security Administration website at ssa.gov to view your eligibility. SSI, or supplemental security income, is based on being low income and having limited resources. You have to qualify based on income and bank accounts and things you own. The definition of disability is the same for both. Essentially, you have to be unable to work for 12 months or more, or have a 12-month terminal illness. Cancer doesn't mean automatic approval in every instance, and the approval process can take months. Some states have their own short-term disability programs. Even fewer states have some income replacement programs for family members because they recognize that people with serious illnesses need someone to stay at home from work as a caregiver. Private disability insurance refers to a policy you bought on your own from a company or broker, or one you get through your work. Be sure to review your policy. The Affordable Care Act pre-existing condition protections do not apply to private disability insurance. That means if you don't have a disability insurance and are diagnosed with cancer, you can be denied disability insurance or charged a lot more for your policy. One tip for those with financial concerns is to read the fine print of any policy. Most require offsetting with SSDI, so it's important to understand exactly how much income to expect. Now let's get back to the American Rescue Plan Act and see how it applies to the workplace. It extends tax credits until September 30th, 2021, and that's the date of this recording, for employers who voluntarily provide Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That's the FFCRA leave. So before it was mandatory, but right now it's employers are incentivized, meaning they get tax credits to provide 2 weeks of paid sick leave at the employee's regular rate of pay if the employee is unable to work due to having COVID-19, and 2 weeks of paid sick leave at 2/3 rate of pay if the employee can't work due to caring for a child whose school is closed related to COVID-19. So, of course, this applies to anyone, not just the cancer community that's affected by COVID-19, but it is important to be aware of the protections out there. The American Rescue Plan Act also has additional protections for the workplace. It provides additional qualifying reasons for paid leave, leave to obtain vaccination for COVID-19, and recovery from any adverse medical condition related to the COVID-19 vaccination. So unemployment insurance payments are based on how much someone made before they laid off. And the more that someone made, the more they collected in unemployment insurance up to a certain amount. The most someone before could be paid is $450 a week. But as you can see on your screen, the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program adds additional money on top of whatever unemployment benefit someone is receiving. So before the pandemic, one could collect unemployment benefits for up to 26 weeks, but the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation extends that to 74 weeks. Now, before the pandemic, independent contractors, business owners, and people who were self employed were not eligible for unemployment insurance. And certainly, someone with cancer could have been an independent contractor, have their own business, or be self employed. So, under the pandemic unemployment assistance, these types of workers who lost their income because of the pandemic can now receive unemployment benefits, and this is now extended to 74 weeks. So, under the Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2021, is another point that I just want to make sure to explain. The Mixed Earner Unemployment Compensation Program was created, and now the American Rescue Plan Act has extended this program through September 26th. So, basically, if someone works as an independent contractor and an employee and they lose both jobs, they can get unemployment for the employment job, and they can also get $100 on top of this to cover unemployment insurance for their independent contractor job. So just wanted to make sure that you understood that there are additional protections if somebody has both a employee job and also work as an independent contractor. Many of you may be familiar with the stimulus. That's $1,400 per person who makes less than $75,000. That's also through the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as the eviction moratorium. President Biden has extended this till March 31st, and that's of the date of this recording. The CARES Act student loan payment suspension, the president has extended this till at least September 30th, 2021. So you don't have to write down these resources. This webinar will be available on YouTube. We are recording it, although we will not be recording the questions that are asked in the chat. But here's some resources regarding the information on COVID-19 that we mentioned. And here are additional resources that you can also take down after this webinar. Again, this webinar is recorded, so you'll be able to press pause on YouTube and jot down any of these websites if you'd like. Hopefully it'll be helpful if you'd like to find out more information. So part 3, to prevent financial toxicity and address financial concerns, we've already covered so much ground. You can be really proud of yourself. We should have insurance. We covered that and understand how to use it. Understand that appeal rights exist. We should also make sure our income is protected and understand what disability benefits for which we may be eligible. Well, even if we've done all that, we can still be subject to debt or financial trouble. So what do we do then? This is what the rest of the presentation will focus on. So if you or someone you know has cancer or another illness and is on the hook for medical bills, I'm going to go over some information that should provide some guidance. I want to talk about balance billing, financing, consumer protection laws, and at the end, I'll briefly show you some websites and resources so that when the presentation is available on our website, you'll have all the contact information you need on this webinar. What if your insurance has paid what it's going to pay and you get a huge medical bill? Where do you start? I won't go into detail about everything on this slide. The one important thing I want to point out is that many patients are unaware of is the ability to negotiate a medical bill. We frequently hear from patients who are unable to pay the full amount they owe a hospital or a provider and have no idea that they may be able to pay a smaller lump sum or set up a payment plan. If you think there's an issue, first, contact the creditor. When you get the billing department on the line, request that your bill be put on hold from collections and your account status be changed to pending. Then request a line item or detailed bill, especially for hospital bills. Line item bills detail every single charge. Confirm that your insurance was billed. Sometimes providers send bills before the insurance payment is reflected. Credit reporting bureaus are required to wait 180 days before putting past due medical debt on a credit report so that patients can work on getting their bills paid. Make sure every single item on that bill was actually ordered by your physician in writing. If your doctor did not order a test or procedure in writing, you can't be charged for it. Look for duplicate charges. Look for upcoding. That's when a provider bills for a more costly procedure than was actually performed. Compare the codes in your medical records against your detailed bill. If it looks like the charges are valid and you can't pay it all now, you can set up a payment plan or try to negotiate a smaller lump sum. If you've determined there are charges you can dispute, write a medical dispute letter to mail, fax, or email. It's important to have it in writing, and if you send by mail, send it certified so you can confirm receipt. Write the letter as soon as possible. Of course, you'll want to put your account information, details on the charges you're disputing, date, time, facilities, physician name, code number, and a statement that explains why you are disputing certain charges. Attach any supporting documentation you have. Once you disputed any errors, you can also make sure the hospital is being fair in its pricing. Another option, if warranted, is to file a complaint with the Department of Public Health or Insurance in your state if you're just not getting anywhere with the hospital. If the task of reviewing a lengthy hospital bill seems impossible given your circumstances, you could consider talking to a medical billing advocate or attorney. Medical billing advocates either charge an hourly fee or a percentage of what they save you. So, additionally, some hospitals have financial navigators, so it can be beneficial to hire or consult with a financial advisor. I want to talk about balanced billing. Some people think that if your health insurance pays your medical provider, that means the insurance company has paid the entire cost of care to your provider, besides your copay, insurance, and deductible. Not the case. If your provider accepts your insurance or accepts assignment from Medicare, the provider has agreed to be paid what the insurance will pay them and accept that payment as payment in full. When your insurance, whether private insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid, pays their provider, they're paying a contracted rate to the provider. For example, a provider service could typically be $500, but they agree to be paid $300 from your insurance. That's the contracted rate between your insurance and the provider, $300. If you visit any in-network provider and get services covered by your insurance plan, they have a contracted rate they agreed to accept from your insurance. So you cannot be billed for the balance. In this example, the remaining $200. To bill you for the balance would be violating the contract between the provider and the insurance company. However, if you go outside your insurance network or get care that is not covered under your policy, then you can be held liable because in those cases, the provider has not negotiated to accept a certain rate and is under no obligation and no contract. So it is not illegal if your provider is under no contract. Now, if you run into this issue, you may be able to file a grievance with the insurance plan, so they're on notice that their provider is violating their contract. So we should be familiar with our policy and make sure our providers are in network, because we know we'd end up on the hook for more out-of-pocket expenses if we see an out-of-network provider. But what if you've done that? You schedule a surgery with an in-network surgeon at an in-network hospital. Then you get a bill for the out-of-network anesthesiologist that you didn't pick. So sometimes this happens to people and is known as surprise balance billing, where the provider bills you for the balance the insurance didn't pay. This has to be illegal, right? Well, unfortunately, before there were no explicit federal protections against balance billing. So, but that has changed. There have been some changes, and one of the reasons why this webinar is so exciting is that I'm able to bring you the most updated information. The Consolidated Appropriations Act, or CAA, includes provisions to alleviate this issue. It's called the No Surprises Act. Starting in 2022, patients will not receive balance bills if they receive emergency care, receive non-emergency care at an in-network hospital, but are unknowingly treated by an out-of-network physician, or receive lab services from an out-of-network lab. Now, this doesn't apply to ground ambulances, but it does apply if you're transported by an air ambulance. So patients only pay the copay and deductible that they normally would be charged by an in-network provider. Any family facing cancer is going to have some out-of-pocket costs. It could be hundreds of, or even thousands of dollars. Providers are now offering ways of financing what you owe. Medical providers will often require you to demonstrate your ability to pay before agreeing to treat you. That's normal unless you're in need of immediate life-saving emergency treatment. Providers know most people don't have this kind of cash on hand and want to be sure they're going to be paid. Your facility may offer options like a medical credit card or a private loan through a partner lender to patients seeking care. It's really important to do your research. Take a little bit of time or ask someone to go over the terms if you choose to finance a medical bill, so you have another set of eyes before you sign. Don't sign on to a loan or card without researching. Some medical credit cards like CareCredit and other companies offer zero interest for 18 months, or some terms like that. It may seem like a no-brainer, but consider your budget. Even at 0%, could you afford to pay off the whole balance at 18 months? That's important to think about, because after 18 months, the interest rate will go way up to something like 26% or so. And with that interest, it may become impossible to pay off the balance. If the hospital says they have a lender they partner with, find out what the hidden terms are there. As we're often warned, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. So it's okay to be skeptical when it comes to loans. That is another example of where it makes sense to talk to your provider. If they're recommending something that you can't afford and might need to take a loan out in order to pay for, maybe they can offer an alternative treatment that is covered by your insurance, or may be able to work with you on your cost sharing. An article by Kaiser Health News shared that hospitals are increasingly asking patients to sign up for these loans while the patient is being treated and doesn't have the capacity to do their due diligence, like when someone's lying in a hospital bed. So just wait until you get home to make a decision. Even if the hospital staff is pressuring you to make a decision right then and there, don't be tempted to make a decision under pressure. Find out if you qualify for low-income assistance before committing to certain repayment terms. Sometimes there's simply not enough money to go around. If bills continue to come in or debt continues to rise, one thing that can help alleviate a bit of the burden, at least temporarily, is to prioritize the most important expenses. For example, if someone has debt that has been secured with collateral, such as a mortgage or a car loan, it may be important to prioritize those expenses or risk repossession or foreclosure. If you stop paying a car loan or mortgage, you risk losing your home or car. Now, of course, as we touched upon, there are some additional protections related to the pandemic, but these protections may not be around forever. So while taking advantage of those protections may help if someone has so many medical expenses and they need to decide what to pay, I wanted to make sure to go over these basics because when the protections go away, a person with cancer may still have medical bills. So, however, if you live somewhere with excellent public transportation and other transportation options like Uber or taxis, maybe in that case, giving up a car isn't as big of a deal, or maybe the household can get by with one car instead of multiple. Along the same lines, same with the home, it's important to pay attention to due dates for other essential things like rent for an apartment. Now, again, I discussed the eviction moratorium, so there might be reasons why things can be prioritized a little bit differently during this time, which is why I thought it was so important to mention those protections. But we often hear from patients and survivors who are struggling with housing issues because they stopped paying their rent or mortgage when their medical bills started piling up. We, of course, think of medical bills as necessities, but in a lot of circumstances, patients are still able to continue receiving care despite having large bills, or may have a lot of flexibility with respect to repayment timing and options as compared to rent or mortgage repayment. So, just something to think about. If you do end up owing a balance that you can't pay off, medical debt or otherwise, and it becomes delinquent, this is certainly not uncommon in this world of incredibly expensive medicine and when there are a lack of income replacement programs. The Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act protects consumers from harassing collection practices by debt collectors. That means collection agencies or attorneys. A debt collector is different than a creditor. A creditor extends credit to individuals. That's the original person who extended you the services. The creditor will then contract with the debt collection agency or attorney or sell the debt to buyers who collect past due debt. So this is something just to keep in mind that you cannot be harassed. A debt collector cannot threaten you or sue you in a faraway venue or call before 8 a.m. or after 9 a.m. If you learn that you owe money, ask the bill collector about it. Get a copy of your credit report. Ask the collector for more info, get their name, address, and request information about the debt in writing. Make sure it's legit. There's so many scams these days where scammers get people on the phone and try to convince them to make an immediate payment over the phone. But this is not a good idea if you don't know who you're paying or why. So when you get the confirmation of the debt that you owe, you may want to check about the statute of limitations, both for debt collection and for credit reporting. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to pay a past due debt that's about to fall off your credit report. If you owe money but cannot pay it, sometimes debt collectors will be sympathetic if you offer to pay a reduced amount, especially if the debt is older. You can try to negotiate. This may be more likely to reduce what you owe if you can pay it all off. So this is all important information to deal with debt. Sometimes we hear from callers who are concerned about their liability for the debts of someone else. In general, if someone dies and has amassed debt during his or her lifetime, their estate would have to pay the debts before the heirs would receive any of the property. While a spouse is not always liable for the debts of the other spouse, there is something called the doctrine of necessaries, which applies in most states, but not all, which does potentially make spouses liable for necessary expenses and debts, such as medical bills, utilities, rent, food, and clothing. Unfortunately, this means that in a lot of circumstances, the widow or widower is responsible for paying off the medical debt of the deceased spouse, the same way a parent would be liable for the medical debt amassed by a minor child. Again, this does vary a bit from state to state. That being said, this liability generally does not pass to anyone else, next of kin, etc., unless someone else has explicitly agreed to be responsible for the medical bills. For example, parents would likely not be responsible for the medical debt of an adult child. An adult child would not be responsible for paying off the medical debt incurred by one of their parents. I want to briefly touch upon debt collection lawsuits. So, what if you can't dispute and can't pay a debt? Should you be worried about a lawsuit? It depends. Each state has its own time limits called statutes of limitations for when a debt collector can sue you. So you might not need to worry about really old debt. You can always call the CLRC, or most states' attorney general websites have a consumer information about debt collection and statutes of limitations. And as you can see in the slides, certain wages are exempt, and the Consumer Credit Protection Act, or CCPA, limits wage garnishment. Here are some insurance resources, and contact the CLRC if you want to ask about COBRA, marketplace insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, insurance appeals. We have comprehensive website with fact sheets, or ask a question for individual assistance. We help people nationwide. And then there are government websites for various programs. For more specific help on Medicare, here are some resources that can help you with your individual questions. And I mentioned this before, but I want to make sure to mention again, SHIP, which is the State Health Insurance Assistance Program. That is a great resource. The first resources on this page is related to the fair debt collection practices I mentioned earlier in this presentation. I'm leaving you with a few medical billing resources here. We do not endorse these or any other companies. And again, this webinar will be recorded, so you don't have to take down every bit of information now. Here's another resource, the Patient Advocate Foundation, that can help you with case management for your health insurance needs. I'm going to leave that up for just a second. If there's a debt collector harassing you, or if you're worried about a lawsuit or wage garnishments, check out this video from the FTC. The link is on your screen. Certain benefits are exempt from wage garnishment. Here's a bit more about that. To find a lawyer, contact the American Bar Association, Legal Aid, or lawhelp.org. And I'm going to make sure to get you out the door before the hour. Everything's contained within the hour. So I'm going to stop soon and take questions. But before I do, this was a condensed introduction to a lot of money-related topics and some pandemic protections. The great thing about the timing of this webinar is that it's happening just as the new law was signed. So there's the most up-to-date protections as of the date of this recording. So all of these topics are things you should find information about on our website. Some of these topics are things we have fact sheets on, or even entire separate webinars. Of course, you can fill out an intake for free for customized information. We're limited to 1 hour webinars, so this had to be quick. And even that is way more than the average human attention span. So thanks for hanging in there. Here's a recap slide of all the topics we went over today. Again, you can feel so good that if you see all the topics that we covered, ranging from insurance, job protections, income replacement, medical bills, debt collectors, and of course, protections related to the pandemic. Thank you so much for participating in this presentation. Please remember that if you have any questions that are specific to your situation, you can either call the CLRC or fill out an online intake, and we will get back to you. Now, before I look at any questions, I'm going to stop the recording. So just bear with me for 1 second, and I'll make sure to stop, and so then I can take any of your questions.